Daniel Reyes had learned to live on very little sleep. Every morning he woke up before sunrise, made breakfast for his 8-year-old daughter Mia, packed her lunch, and dropped her off at school before rushing to his first job. He worked as a delivery driver in the morning and a warehouse worker at night. It had been 2 years since his wife passed away, and since then, Daniel had been doing everything alone. Money was always tight, and some months he was not sure how he would pay the rent. One afternoon, while checking his phone during a short break, Daniel saw a message from a staffing agency he had registered with months earlier. The message said there was an opening for a personal assistant and caregiver position. The pay was much higher than anything he was currently making. The only details given were that the client was a private individual who needed help with daily tasks, and that discretion was required. Daniel did not waste time thinking about it. He called the number immediately. The agency arranged an interview for the very next day. Daniel wore his best shirt, the one he saved for important occasions, and took the bus to a large office building downtown. He had imagined the job might involve helping an elderly person at home. He never expected what was waiting for him on the top floor. The receptionist led him into a glass-walled office, and there, behind a wide desk, sat a woman in a wheelchair. Her name was Eleanor Whitfield, and she was the CEO of one of the largest logistics companies in the city. She looked at him sharply, her eyes moving from his shoes to his face, as if she were already deciding whether he was good enough. "You're late," she said, even though Daniel had arrived 5 minutes early. "I apologize. I'll make sure that never happens again," Daniel replied calmly. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Most people apologized nervously or tried to argue. Daniel did neither. He simply accepted the comment and moved forward, waiting for her next question. Eleanor explained that 18 months earlier, she had been in a serious car accident that left her paralyzed from the waist down. Since then, she had gone through 5 different caregivers, and none of them had lasted more than a few weeks. She admitted, in a blunt tone, that she had a difficult personality and little patience for people who treated her like she was fragile. "I don't need sympathy," she said. "I need someone who can keep up with my schedule, push my chair when needed, and not treat me like I'm broken." Daniel looked her directly in the eyes. "I'm not here to feel sorry for you. I'm here to do a job. If you need help, I'll help. If you don't, I'll wait until you do." For the first time in a long while, Eleanor did not have a sharp reply ready. She simply nodded and told him to start the following Monday. The first few weeks were not easy. Eleanor tested Daniel constantly. She gave him short, rude instructions, criticized small mistakes, and seemed to expect him to quit, just like the others before him. But Daniel did not quit. He had faced harder days than this, days filled with grief and worry about how he would feed his daughter. A demanding boss was nothing new to him. Slowly, small moments began to build trust between them. When Eleanor dropped her pen and reached for it herself instead of asking for help, Daniel did not rush to grab it for her. He waited, allowing her the dignity of doing it herself, only stepping in if she truly needed assistance. Eleanor noticed this. None of her previous caregivers had understood that difference. One afternoon, everything changed. Daniel received a call from Mia's school saying she had a high fever and needed to be picked up immediately. Daniel panicked. He had no one else to call. His own parents lived in another state, and his late wife's family rarely kept in touch. He quietly explained the situation to Eleanor, expecting her to be angry about him having to leave early. Instead, Eleanor surprised him. "Bring her here," she said. "There's a quiet room down the hall. She can rest there while you finish your work." Daniel hesitated, but he had no other choice. He picked up Mia, who was pale and shivering, and brought her to the office. Eleanor watched from her desk as Daniel gently laid his daughter down on a couch, covered her with his own jacket, and spoke to her in a soft, comforting voice. There was a tenderness in him that Eleanor had never seen in anyone who worked for her. It reminded her of something she had lost a long time ago, a closeness with her own son that had faded after her divorce. From that day forward, something shifted between Daniel and Eleanor. She no longer spoke to him with the same coldness. She began asking him questions about his life, about Mia, about how he managed to stay so calm despite everything he had been through. Daniel, in turn, learned more about Eleanor. He learned that the accident which left her paralyzed was not just bad luck. She believed someone wanted her out of the company, and the timing of the crash had never sat right with her. She told him about Richard Cole, her business partner, who had taken over many of her responsibilities while she recovered. At first, she thought he was simply helping during a difficult time. But slowly, she began noticing strange decisions being made without her approval, missing files, and meetings she was never informed about. She suspected Richard wanted to push her out permanently and take full control of the company. Eleanor admitted to Daniel that she had nobody she could trust completely. Her assistants reported to Richard. Her board members were loyal to whoever held power. The only person who had shown her honesty without trying to gain anything from it was Daniel. One evening, after the office had emptied out, Eleanor asked Daniel for a favor that went beyond his job description. She needed someone to help her quietly collect old documents and records from a storage office before Richard could have them removed. Daniel agreed without hesitation, even though he knew it might put his job at risk. Over the following weeks, Daniel helped Eleanor in ways that were not part of his official duties. He drove her to private meetings with a former employee who had information about missing safety records linked to the night of her accident. He helped her organize documents late at night when no one else was in the building. He never asked for anything in return, and that selflessness made Eleanor trust him completely. But trouble soon followed. Richard Cole began to notice Eleanor was gathering information, and he grew worried. One day, he approached Daniel privately and offered him a large sum of money. In exchange, Daniel would need to sign a statement claiming that Eleanor was mentally unstable and unfit to continue running the company. Richard promised that no one would ever know, and that the money would be more than enough to secure a better future for Daniel and his daughter. Daniel refused immediately. He told Richard that he would never lie about someone who had shown him nothing but respect, especially not for money. Richard's expression turned cold. He warned Daniel that he had made a serious mistake. A few days later, the staffing agency called Daniel to inform him that his contract had been terminated due to complaints from the client's office. Daniel knew immediately that Richard was behind it. Worse, he soon received a letter claiming that his ability to care for his daughter was being questioned, based on false reports of negligence. Daniel felt his world crumbling. Everything he had worked so hard to protect, his daughter's stability and his own reputation, was now under threat because he refused to betray someone who trusted him. When Eleanor learned what had happened, she was furious, but not at Daniel. She immediately contacted her lawyer and personally intervened to stop the false claims against him. She also realized that Richard's actions confirmed what she had feared all along, that he was willing to do anything to protect his control over the company. With time running out before the company's annual shareholder meeting, where Richard planned to push through a vote to remove Eleanor permanently from her position, Eleanor and Daniel worked through the night to organize every piece of evidence they had gathered. There were maintenance records showing her car had been tampered with shortly before the crash. There were emails showing Richard pressuring staff to hide information from her. It was enough to expose the truth, but only if she could present it without being stopped first. On the day of the shareholder meeting, Eleanor arrived at the company headquarters with Daniel by her side, pushing her wheelchair through the same hallways where she once walked confidently as the most powerful person in the room. Whispers spread as people noticed her unexpected presence. Richard, seated at the head of the table, looked visibly uneasy. When the meeting began, Richard tried to take control immediately, suggesting that due to her health, Eleanor should step back and allow new leadership to take over permanently. Just as he expected silence in response, Eleanor calmly asked to speak. The room quieted. She presented the evidence, document by document, with a steady and clear voice. She spoke about the maintenance reports, the suspicious timing of decisions made in her absence, and the testimony of a former employee who had come forward. Daniel stood beside her the entire time, not saying a word, but his presence gave her strength. Richard tried to dismiss the claims as baseless accusations, but the evidence was too strong to ignore. Several board members who had once stayed silent out of fear began asking pointed questions. By the end of the meeting, the board voted not to remove Eleanor, but to remove Richard from his position entirely. Authorities were later notified to investigate the cause of her accident more thoroughly. Walking out of that boardroom, Eleanor felt something she had not felt in a long time, not just victory, but peace. For the first time since the accident, she did not feel like a burden or a problem to be managed. She felt like herself again, a woman who had fought for her own dignity and had finally won. In the weeks that followed, life began to change for both Eleanor and Daniel. With Richard gone, Eleanor took the time to reflect on everything that had happened. She realized that strength was not about controlling everyone around her, but about trusting the right people and allowing them to help without feeling weak for needing it. She offered Daniel a new position within the company, one focused on improving accessibility for employees and customers with disabilities. It was steady work, meaningful work, and something Daniel was naturally good at because of everything he had learned while caring for Eleanor. He accepted the offer gratefully, knowing it meant a stable future for himself and Mia. Mia, who had visited Eleanor's office many times during her father's months of work there, had grown fond of Miss Eleanor. The two had built their own small friendship, with Eleanor often asking about Mia's schoolwork and Mia drawing small pictures to leave on Eleanor's desk. What began as a professional arrangement slowly turned into something that felt like family. One evening, months after everything had settled, Eleanor invited Daniel and Mia to her home for dinner. It was a simple gathering, nothing extravagant, but filled with warmth that none of them had expected to find in each other's lives. As they sat together at the table, Eleanor watched Daniel help Mia with her plate, the same gentle care he always showed, and she felt a quiet gratitude settle over her. Before they left that night, Eleanor reached out and gently took Daniel's hand. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than words could express. This was a woman who once refused help from anyone, who had pushed away every person who tried to get close to her after the accident. Yet here she was, holding the hand of someone who had stood by her not out of duty, but out of genuine loyalty. As Daniel walked Mia to the car that evening, he looked back at the house and smiled. Life had not been easy for him since losing his wife, and there were many nights he wondered if things would ever get better. But somehow, through an unexpected job and an unlikely friendship, he had found something he never thought he would have again, a sense of belonging, and a future filled with hope rather than fear. And for Eleanor, who had spent so long believing that leadership meant standing alone, she finally understood that true strength came not from control, but from connection. She had learned this from the most unexpected teacher of all, a single father who simply refused to give up on her, even when everyone else had.